right now. So we're recording. How's that? All right, I remembered. Yay! So yes, I dressed up today. I dressed up today because I'm sitting in the rare book room of the Cross Memorial Library, and I figured when I'm around the books here, I better dress up nice because they get worried. You know, they expect that. So if people you were joining me today on this particular videotape, I am sitting in the rare book room of the Cross Memorial Library, where we have about 3,500 rare books up here. We have 8,000 altogether. We have them in other storage facilities on campus that are secure, but these are the ones that we feel are very, very important, and we keep them here. I worked with them for 20 years of my life. When I had time, when I wasn't doing other things, I would come up here and catalog the books. So here we are. And today we're going in the 18th chapter of Acts, and I'm only going to do the first 12 verses because the first 12 verses spell out a lot of important information that we need to take note of, because we're going to Corinth. Paul is headed to Corinth, okay? And we who are people of the book, the Bible, we know that Paul wrote two letters to the church in Corinth after he left. So this was an important congregation to him. And one of the things that we learn, well, I'm just going to read the text because we're going to hear what this is all about. Luke does a phenomenal job in bringing this to our attention as a historian would. So chapter 18, verse 1. After this, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth. All right, so let's stop there. He left Athens. That's where we were in chapter 17. Where he gave this sermon. He preached a sermon about, I see you have a statue to the unknown God. And hi, I'd like to talk to you about this God. And then the sermon sort of goes flat. There are a few people who are moved by the sermon, but it really leaves a lot more questions. And as I said, I heard once there's a group of people in the church who think that that's because Paul didn't come and talk about sin. He tried to meet people where they were in terms of their learning and their understanding. It didn't work. He was in Athens. The sermon did work. Certain people accepted the message, but many people were upset because as soon as he mentioned the resurrection, they were going, that's not a part of that's not what we're talking about. What's all this about? And so it confused them. So he now comes to Corinth. Corinth is south of Athens, and it sits right at the base of what is called an isthmus. Okay, so this is an island that is surrounded, a piece of land that is surrounded on three sides by water. And Corinth is that little place. It's if you can imagine, it's almost as like the nation of Panama. It's that little strip of land that connects North America with South America, and Panama is this little sliver of land. Well, think of that as just a bit smaller, a bit narrower, and that's where Corinth is situated. It's situated as it leads into this isthmus where you're going. If you went further south, you would be in Sparta. So he heads down to Corinth, and he's on this isthmus, okay? So there we have this. So let's read a little further. There he found a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all Jews to depart from Rome. Okay, so there's an interesting Jewish community in Corinth, and it is there because the Roman Emperor Claudius had threw all the Jews out of Rome. Okay, so he orders them out. And so Aquila and Priscilla come and settle in Corinth. They are on this town, this very important town, a Roman settlement that's on an isthmus. Now, because Corinth is right on this narrow piece of land that connects northern Greece with southern Greece, okay, it doesn't have one seaport. It has two seaports. It has one on each side of this little sliver of land. And so it has two seaports. And they had technology where they could actually transfer a ship from one side to the other side. Using pulleys and wheels, they were able to mount ships and actually move them across the isthmus and put them on the other side, probably for a nice fee. But here you have this technology of pulleys and ropes and being able to move these ships across this little isthmus, because Corinth has two seaports. Corinth was destroyed in its earlier history, but resurrected and rebuilt, renovated, urban renewal in 44 BC. And it is a Roman colony, and they are very proud of their Roman heritage and their Roman identity. That we see in many places. Philippi is the same thing. It's a retirement community for the Roman military. And so here, Corinth is a very famous Roman settlement. They have a heritage that they're proud of. So he meets Aquila and Priscilla, who are Jews who have been ordered out of Rome by the Emperor Claudius. What we know from a Roman historian named Suetonius is that the Jews were exiled or ordered out of Rome because they were rather riotous, disruptive, and they were arguing over a person by the name of Chrestos. Chresto. We have that in the documentation from Suetonius, Chresto. Now, there's a possibility, there are several possibilities for this. One, there was a person by the name of Chresto who upset the Jewish community and caused a number of riots. But it's awfully close to the name of Christ, Chresto, Christ. And so there is a possibility that what was upsetting the Jewish community in Rome was this talk about a person named Christ. And so here we have this moment of, hi, I am talking to you about Christ and there are riots. Is this unusual? No. We saw this in Philippi. We saw this in Philippi. We've seen this in Asia Minor, where Paul is preaching. He preaches and it ends up in a riot. I mean, today it ends up in a coffee hour. It ends up in a coffee hour with cake. But in those days, Paul caused riots when he preached about the Christ, because it upset the Jewish community. Because he was asking them, he was saying, we have now found the Messiah, the one who was promised, and it is this person, Jesus, the rabbi from Nazareth. He is that person. So this is interesting that we have this. It is a possibility. Do we have definitive proof? No. But it's the Chrestos and Christo, this is a very real possibility. And if there was one thing that would incite a Jewish community in a city to become upset, it would be talk about this Jesus as the Christ. So here we have Aquila and Priscilla now living in Corinth. Paul approached them, and because he worked at the same trade, he stayed with them, for they were tent makers by trade. This is a fact that we never knew about Paul. Luke now introduces this to us. He is a tent maker. Okay? Now, let's just step back for a second and talk about tents. He has this skill, he has this profession. Tents. These are not necessarily canvas tents. These are probably, he's working with leather. He's working probably with leather. It could be canvas tents, but we sometimes think that it was more like it was leather products. And these tents would be very important, not so much for people who want to take a vacation and go camping. That was not on the radar screen for individuals, but for the military. This is a very lucrative industry, particularly for the military. And the military, if you have leather goods, they're going to be interested in a lot of things that would be made of leather, in addition to the tents, sandals, belts, all of the things that we use as leather today were being used then. So Paul has a skill. And so he comes to Corinth, and he now meets Aquila and Priscilla, and they go into business together. All right. So now we know that Paul has come down from Athens. He's arrived in Corinth. We know that Corinth is on an isthmus. It has 2 seaports, very busy place, very proud of this newly renovated city in 44 BC. It has a Jewish community. Some of them come from Rome, having been expelled from Rome. Paul meets them. He meets Aquila and Priscilla. He's a tent maker, and he is in a profession that the military would be very interested in. And if you were looking for a clientele to sell something to, the Roman army would be very good. The Roman army would be a source of good income. You would have steady employment. So here we are in these few verses, these first 3 verses spell out a lot of information. That's Luke the historian showing his trade. So he, Paul, verse 4, addressed both Jews and Greeks in the synagogue every Sabbath, attempting to persuade them. He's attempting to, this is preaching, he's persuading them. He's making a proclamation. He's addressing them. He's addressing the word literally translates address, but understanding that address he's more or less trying to persuade them this Jesus is the Christ. So here we have that wonderful piece of information. Paul's following his old tradition. When I have a synagogue, I'm going to go to the synagogue. When I have that synagogue, I'm going to go to those people. I'm going to talk with them. Now, when Silas and Timothy arrived from Macedonia, Paul became wholly absorbed with proclaiming the word, testifying to the Jews that Jesus was the Christ. So how I am phrasing this is important. Jesus is the Christ. Jesus of Nazareth is the follower, is the fulfillment that we have been waiting for. When they opposed him and reviled him, he protested by shaking out his clothes and said to them, "Your blood be on your own heads. I am guiltless. From now on, I will go to the Gentiles." So, as happens sometimes, Paul's message upsets people. And so he's very upset the fact that he's being asked to leave the synagogue. He was there, it said, he addressed the synagogue every Sabbath, attempting to persuade them. So it was more than once. He was addressing them over a series of Saturdays where he was talking to them about Jesus being the Christ. It upset them. So he says, all right, I'll leave you go, and I'm going to go to the Gentiles now. All right. So verse 7, then Paul left the synagogue and went to the house of a person named Titius Justus, a Gentile who worshiped God. Now look at this detail. Luke, you're good. Whose house was next door to the synagogue. Well, Paul didn't get very far. We in the English-speaking world would say, it's in your face. He's right next door. He's right next door in the house of a person who worshiped God. In other words, he's a God-fearer. He's a Gentile. He's a Gentile who worshiped God, the God of Israel. He adopted the God of Israel as his God. He was impressed with the message. He was impressed with what God did, how God was represented. Oh, where's the house? Right next to the synagogue. So Paul doesn't get very far away from them. He's right there. Now it gets even more intriguing. Crispus, the president of the synagogue, believed in the Lord together with his entire household, and many of the Corinthians who heard about it believed and were baptized. Ta-da! So the president of the synagogue, the president of the church council of the synagogue, accepts Paul's message and says, yes, Jesus is the Christ. He is baptized. His entire household is baptized. My goodness, this is really wonderful. Look at this. So there we are. So he's right next door to the synagogue, but even more impressive is the fact that the president of the synagogue, the president of church council, becomes a believer in Jesus and is baptized. So this is upsetting to the community. Excuse me. This is upsetting to the community. So then the Lord said to Paul by a vision in the night, "Do not be afraid, but speak, and do not be silent, because I am with you. And no one will assault you to harm you, because I have many people in this city." Now this is important, the next detail of verse 11. So he stayed there 1 year and 6 months, teaching the word of God among them. So he stays in Corinth for 1.5 years. This he has not done before. He stays here for 1.5 years. So hence, when he writes 2 letters to this congregation is very important to him because he spent a great deal of time there. Why can he spend a great deal of time there? Well, he's got a profession, and he's got Aquila and Priscilla and he get together, and they are earning money. They are earning money. And so he is not a burden to the congregation. He is what we would say now bivocational, meaning he's doing pastoral duties, but he also has a regular job. This is something that is becoming a fact of life in the church in the 21st century, that sometimes pastors we cannot assure a person in seminary that you will have a full-time job in a parish. And so we look for people who are bivocational. In other words, you have a day job, and then you do your parish work on the side. In the 1990s, we wouldn't have even thought about that. We were very upset about that. Now it's a fact of life in many areas where the pastor has a job, works that job, and then does pastoral is able to support himself and works in the church in the evenings and on weekends. So Paul is bivocational. So when this was being passed around, what is this all about? What is this like? It's like, well, we have a biblical model for that. There's the Apostle Paul, who was doing his work during the day, basically, and had a job, and then did his pastoral work at other times. So here we have this. He stays here a year and a half. A year and a half he is here. Hence why he would write 2 letters to a congregation that is very close to him. So we see this town of Corinth. It's a Roman colony. They're proud of it. It's on an isthmus. They have 2 seaports. This is a busy place. They have technology. They can move ships. Emperor Nero will attempt to build a canal, but it didn't work. And when Claudius dies, Nero comes to the throne. He is the Roman emperor. He rescinds Claudius's order to exile Jews, and Jews return to Rome. And who returns to Rome but Aquila and Priscilla? So they head back to Rome, and we know that from Romans 16:3. Paul greets them, Aquila and Priscilla. So he's there with them for quite a good period of time. They work together. They create a business. It's a lucrative business. They're working with leather products, tents, and other things that would be made from leather. They are the experts. And when Nero revokes the expulsion of the Jews, Aquila and Priscilla return to that place. So here we are. So here's this wonderful, 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 wonderful story of Corinth. And I've set the background for this because we're going to hear more about Paul's efforts in Corinth. We don't know a great deal. We don't know we have a few more incidents, and then we're back in Asia Minor. But this is when Luke says he's here for a year and a half. That's a significant amount of time. He's built up a significant relationship. It's a long time for him to stay in a place, but it makes sense. He has a lucrative business. He has a clientele that are interested in his products. He has a congregation where the president of the church council of the synagogue has joined, along with a lot of other people from Corinth, Jews and Gentiles. And then God comes and says, stay. And what I find interesting is that, we receive guidance when we need it. Paul didn't know he was supposed to stay in Corinth, for a long before he got there. It was when he was there and wondering what he needed to do, and he felt God's answer. He felt God giving him the answer and saying, "Stay here. You have a good congregation. You're building a congregation. Stay there. Pastor them. Be with them. Preach the word. Share the word with them." And so here's this wonderful, wonderful relationship, and God comes as Paul's asking the question. And it's sort of sometimes what happens in our lives. We receive guidance when we need it. When we need it, we receive it. All right, so now I'm going to stop the recording.